How is everybody doing today? Thank you for stopping by to visit the channel for this upcoming unbiased bowl game preview. If you want to stay updated with the latest highlights or game previews, hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, and select all so you won't miss another video. In this preview, it's all about the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl between Ohio State and Washington. It is a representative of the Pac-12 champions versus the Big Ten champs, as the way it should be. Without further ado, let's review the resumes between the two teams. I'm going to bring two truth bombs here. Obviously, the first thing. Duh, if Ohio State went undefeated, they would have been in the playoff, but they would have had just as many wins against F+ top 25 teams as Clemson and Notre Dame combined with two of them, which tells me that their resume would have been slightly better than Clemson and Notre Dame, and they had better quality wins. The second thing, they would have had the worst offensive schedule among the teams in the playoff and among the teams in the New Year's Six bowl games, and that includes UCF. They are tied with their rivals from up north for playing the most teams with an offensive S&P Plus rating 100 or worse with 4, and it was almost 5 with TCU being ranked 99th. However, when you look at that defensive schedule, it is as pristine as it gets. They face one team ranked 100 or worse in defensive S&P and 4 teams ranked in the top 25 in that metric with 2 in the top 10. The only team who faced more top 10 defensive S&P Plus teams would be LSU with 3. That tells me their high offensive S&P Plus ranking was earned, and they're not going to be intimidated by any defense they see on the field. So here's the long and the short of it. Washington is simply Michigan with a slightly better passing game than Purdue. Michigan's ranking in rushing offense, rushing defense, and passing defense is either one spot below or one spot ahead of each other. If you're a Washington fan, you're not liking your chances due to the Buckeyes literally did whatever they wanted to Michigan, and they should have been arrested for it. The only thing you have going for you is the fact that Purdue was able to light up Ohio State's secondary. David Blau was sensational against the Buckeyes, throwing for 378 yards, and wide receiver Rondale Moore was a nightmare with 12 catches for 170 yards. Washington was a sexy pick to make the college football playoff this year. They returned a wealth of experience at the offensive line, but they lost left tackle Trey Adams for pretty much 3/4 of the season. It was a big loss, but he made his return to the starting lineup in the Pac-12 title game against Utah. Without him, they were able to navigate through a solid schedule. The Huskies faced one team outside of the top 100 in F+, and half of their opponents were ranked in the top 50 or better. They beat 16th ranked Utah twice this season and defeated their rivals 19th ranked Washington State to win the Apple Cup. Their offensive schedule was solid as well. They faced 6 teams ranked in the top 50 or better in offensive S&P+, but they haven't faced an elite offense yet, despite their top 5 defensive S&P+ ranking. Stanford shows up a few times in this comparison, but Oregon best resembles Ohio State's pass defense, but is 3 spots lower than the Buckeyes. The Stanford rush defense is not a good comparison since they are 13 spots ahead of the Bucks. Against Stanford, Myles Gaskin ran for 5.29 yards per carry against the Cardinal defense for 148 yards, and the offensive line bulldozed the Stanford front and were responsible for 3.08 adjusted line yards per carry. Against the Ducks passing defense, Browning had one of his solid games, throwing for 243 yards on a 60% completion rate, and he threw for 9.7 yards per attempt. The Ducks, however, did hold Browning to only 1 touchdown as they dominated field position to win that game. Now, in their game against the Cougars, the Husky defense allowed running back James Williams to run for 5.9 yards per carry on a success rate of 64%. The Washington State offensive line blocked considerably well for him, as he had an opportunity rate of 55% when the ball was handed off to him. The passing offense comparison doesn't bode well for the Huskies either. KJ Costello had a ball game against the Husky secondary, throwing for 347 yards, 2 touchdowns at a 64% completion rate. His main target was Caden Smith. He was targeted 8 times and he caught all 8 passes for 107 yards and 1 touchdown. The Huskies, however, did pick off Costello 3 times in that game, but the pass rush got to him once. So now that we reviewed the resumes of the two teams, let's take a look at the tail of the tape. Now, we see the overall quality between the two teams shows that this game has the potential to be a tight contest. Both teams are ranked within 1 spot of each other in F+, FEI, and S&P+. Vegas likes the Buckeyes in this one as a 6.5 point favorite, but S&P has this as a tight contest with the Buckeyes almost as a field goal favorite and a win expectancy of 56%. When Ohio State has the ball, the matchup looks like it is in their favor. Washington has faced some solid offenses, but the Buckeyes are indeed an elite bunch. They are 6th in offensive success rate and 5th in passing offense S&P. Both of those marks are the best the Husky defense has faced all season long, and in any other year, the trigger man for the Buckeye offense, Dwayne Haskins Jr., would have won the Heisman Trophy. The kid put up ridiculous numbers, throwing for over 4,500 yards with 47 touchdowns and only 8 picks. His favorite targets, Paris Campbell and KJ Hill, are oozing with speed, and Johnny Dixon is not too shabby himself. Washington must find a way to get to Haskins with a pass rush, but they are rated 111th in defensive adjusted sack rate, and the Bucs are one of the nation's best in pass protection. However, it should be noted, the Huskies were able to get to Gardner Minshew of Washington State a few times, and the Cougs are number 1 in offensive adjusted sack rate. However, the one thing the Huskies do well is not allowing explosive plays. They are 3rd in the nation in that metric, and that could be huge in dealing with the speed of the Buckeye offense. Linebacker Ben Burr-Kirven is a tackling machine for the Huskies, and he is seemingly everywhere on the field. Another thing to keep an eye on is the battle between the trenches. The Ohio State offensive line has the advantage of not allowing negative plays in the backfield, and Washington's front is not particularly disruptive. If the Bucs can get the ground game going like they did against Michigan, it could be a long day in Pasadena for the Huskies. Now, when Washington has the ball, the Huskies hold a solid advantage over the Buckeye defense. The Washington offense isn't as good as it was in previous years, but they have one thing going for them. The Buckeye defense isn't as good as it was either. As I mentioned before, Washington's passing offense best resembles Purdue, and the matchup didn't bode well for the Buckeyes in that game. The main difference between Purdue and Washington is their offensive explosiveness. The Boilermakers are ranked 7th, but the Huskies are ranked 62nd, which is 7 spots ahead of Nebraska, and the Huskers wasn't nearly explosive as Purdue was against the Bucs. The main advantage the Bucs have over the Huskies is their defensive line over their offensive line. Despite the fact they are one of the worst teams in the country in defensive explosiveness, their defensive line is one of the most disruptive bunches in the country, ranking 7th in defensive stuff rate and 4th in defensive adjusted line yardage. Washington faced one team ranked in the top 10 in defensive adjusted line yardage, and that was Utah at 7th, and the Husky offensive line didn't fare too well the second time around against the Utes. Getting Trey Adams back at full strength will be key for the Huskies, because the Husky offensive line will have their hands full blocking Draymond Jones and Chase Young. Some major keys in this game for Ohio State is for them to utilize their team speed. If Dwayne Haskins can scan the field and find his playmakers out in space, Washington will have a tough time trying to tackle those guys. Also, the running backs must do a better job of finding creases and creating balance for the offense. For Washington, they have to keep Jake Browning upright. If Draymond Jones and Chase Young are living in the backfield, it's going to get uglier than a masterpiece sneaker for the Huskies. The computer is thinking this one is going to be a tight contest in favor of the Buckeyes to the score of 30-27. The Bucs score 162% over what their opponents allow, but they allow 95% of what their opponents score. The Huskies are a solid defensive unit. They allow 65% of what their opponents score, but they score 95% of what their opponents allow. It is the least productive scoring offense out of the 12 New Year's Six Bowl participants against FBS opponents. So the Buckeyes' schedules show they haven't faced a litany of solid offenses, which doesn't bode well for a defense that hasn't met the same Ohio State standard this year, except on the defensive line. The Huskies haven't been at full strength all season long, especially on the offensive line, and they look to regain their past form. The concern I have for Washington is if they can match up athletically against Ohio State's playmakers, and can they tackle in space. They did a fantastic job against Washington State's spread, but Dwayne Haskins is much better than Gardner Minshew in my opinion. Now, giving Chris Petersen a month to prepare can be terrifying, but I believe the Bucs are going to go hard for Urban Meyer's last game on the sidelines in this one, and they're going to put together a complete game to the score of 38-24. And that is it for this Rose Bowl game preview. Let me know what your thoughts are on the game in the comment section below. Give me your score prediction and also tell me why your respective team is going to win the game. I hope you enjoyed the video. All I ask is that you give the video a like, and if you love college football as much as I do, hit that subscribe button if you want to stay updated with the latest previews and the occasional highlights, and I thank you all for watching.